Everyone, my name is Davina Passeri. I am a research oceanographer at the USGS St. Petersburg Coastal and Marine Science Center, and today I'm going to be presenting on assessing sustainable restoration measures to increase barrier island resilience. This is the Alabama Barrier Island Restoration Assessment. My talk today is going to focus on Dauphin Island, which is a low-lying barrier island that sits off the Alabama coast. It is home to about 2,400 property owners, also the Audubon Bird Sanctuary, and it contains cultural resources in the form of the historic Fort Gaines and also archaeological sites. So this is an economically and ecologically significant island for the state of Alabama. Now, Dauphin Island has been severely impacted during extreme storm events in the past, which you can see on the images to the far right here. The top was taken in 2001. The middle was after Hurricane Ivan in 2004, which caused extensive overwash on the island. And then the bottom was a year later after Hurricane Katrina in 2005, which actually breached the island and cut it into two. The Alabama Barrier Island Restoration Assessment was funded by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation and was done in collaboration between the state of Alabama, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the USGS. And the objective was to assess different restoration options for Dauphin Island to increase the island's sustainability, but also to restore vital habitats for species affected by the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. To do this, we assembled an interdisciplinary project team made up of coastal engineers, oceanographers, biologists, ecologists, and geologists. And you can see from this slide there were many people involved in this study. It was not only a cross-agency effort, but also within each agency, it was a cross-center effort. The project began with a field data collection campaign in which a variety of data was collected, including sediment cores to look at variability in sediment characteristics across the island, bathymetry that was used to make a present-day DEM, but also to understand historic changes in bed levels, water levels, waves, and currents for the purpose of model validation, and then habitat distribution and characterization data to provide a baseline for the habitat models. We wanted to understand how the island might evolve in the future, looking out on decadal timescales. And so to do that, we developed this integrated modeling approach where we used 3 different morphologic models. We used Delft3D to simulate a longshore sediment transport during quiescent conditions, XBeach to simulate storm-induced beach and dune evolution, and then Edgar, which is an empirical dune growth model to account for post-storm dune recovery. And so by integrating these 3 models together, we're able to simulate the movement of sand during fair weather conditions and also during extreme storm events. As I mentioned, we wanted to look out on decadal timescales, in particular a 10-year time period, and we wanted to consider variations in our climatology, meaning variability in storminess or the frequency and intensity of storms, and also sea level rise. So we used a Monte Carlo sampling method and a synthetic storm suite to generate 4 different storminess scenarios in which the number of storms and the storm intensity varied. And you can see that in the table on the right here. And so each of these storm scenarios was meant to capture different island responses, ranging from just beach and dune erosion to complete inundation of the island and the potential for breaching. We also considered 3 sea level rise scenarios, ranging from 30 centimeters all the way up to 1 meter. So between the 4 storminess scenarios and the 3 sea level rise scenarios, we had a total of 12 scenarios. This set of figures is showing our modeled island elevation at the end of the 10-year simulation period. And so as you move down the rows, we have our scenarios of increased storminess, and as we move across the columns, we have our scenarios of increased sea level rise. What you'll notice here is if you look at a particular row of storminess, as we crank up sea level rise, we start to see breaching, particularly in the middle of the island. Same thing goes for storminess. So if you look at the very bottom row here, this is the most frequent, most intense storms. We start to see some significant land loss and even complete drowning of the island within 10 years. The output from the morphologic models was used to look at how habitats would change on the island. So the top row here is showing habitats under a low storminess and low sea level rise scenario. And so what you can see here, the dominant habitats are beach and dune and barrier flat, along with some back barrier marsh. And then the bottom row is habitats under a high storminess and high sea level rise scenario. This is one of the scenarios where the island breaches in the middle. And so we see less of the beach and dune habitats, less of the back barrier marsh, and instead we're getting more intertidal habitats and open water. The output from the morphologic and habitat models was used to develop different restoration measures with stakeholders. The objective of the restoration measures was to maximize ecological function and resources and to minimize social impacts and cost. So there were 23 different restoration measures that were evaluated, which included scenarios of offshore sand placement, beach and dune nourishment, marsh restoration, and land acquisition. And so we plugged each of these 23 measures back into our morphologic and habitat models and reran the models to look at how each restoration measure would change the island elevations and also the resulting habitats. To evaluate the restoration measures, a decision analysis framework was developed to look at trade-offs between each measure and how they aligned with multiple stakeholder objectives. The highest ranked restoration measures minimized impacts to habitat, had low maintenance cost, low impact to infrastructure, and gains in critical habitat. Now, since the completion of the project last year, there are 3 projects that have been selected for implementation, including beach and dune nourishment, marsh restoration, and borrow pit restoration. Ahead of the restoration actions being implemented, a feasibility level monitoring and adaptive management plan was developed based on a conceptual ecological model for the island. This MAM plan uses the performance measures to track success of the restoration actions over time, and it can also be used to determine if and when adaptive management is needed. So that's all I have. To learn more about this study, you can visit the project storymap, which we put together in order to communicate the findings of the project to the general public. And the link for that storymap is right here at the bottom of this slide. Thank you.